All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grace Jones. I am a school psychologist. I work currently at the high school across the street at Laguna Beach High School. I have been a school psychologist 20 years now, and I have been a fan of research for much longer. The presentation I wanted to give to you today is about positive psychology and what research shows that we as moms, as dads, as parents, as people in the community, what we can glean from this really cool newer research about happiness and how to cultivate that. I called the presentation Happiness Hacks because I wanted you to walk away with like a good amount of strategies that you can use within your family or within your soul to shift to happiness. And if you're already a happy person, awesome, stay there. But maybe you want to learn just a few more things about what science is telling us about happiness and how we can support that in our family. So what I'd like you to do is I want you to find your phone, and I would like you to open up your photo app and find a photo that makes you feel some type of feeling of happiness or joy. And go ahead and pull that up. I would like you to share it with someone and tell them why you feel happy when you see it. Okay. Now, if you're at home and you can't share it with yourself, what I'd love for you to do is hop on the chat and just write in what your photo was. Like, is it of your dog or your brand new fence in your backyard or whatever it is that brings you joy and why it makes you feel happy. I might share mine since we're a little light on our participation in-house. But while you're doing that, I'll give you another second or two. So good.
That's the one in the chat that says, me with my 3 kids in front of the ocean.
Oh, I wish I could see that photo. In my mind, it's beautiful. Let me see yours. Oh, wow.
I'm doing so her first
Communion or confirmation? Confirmation. Oh, what a beautiful family you have. You look gorgeous in that dress, by the way. What did you get?
I picked mine, it's a recently saved one, it's my mom and I at my wedding.
Oh, that's gorgeous. A black and white photo of your mom and her hugging in her wedding gown. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. Okay, I'll show mine. I don't know if you can actually see it here. It's a picture of my 2 kids, my husband and I, with our beautiful dog Ruffles, who is the love of my life. And it was at my sister's house, and we are just like genuinely happy. It's not staged. It's not the most beautiful picture I ever have on my phone. Anybody else in the chat just want to share their photo? Oh, they came out there. They did. Oh, beautiful. Oh, hi, Jessica. You look like you're in San Clemente at the pier. Look at those gorgeous smiles on such a beautiful day. I love it. Okay, did anyone pick a photo of their new car? Hello, thank you so much for being here. We were just doing an activity with our phones, but did anyone show a photo of their carpet that they just got installed and they spent a lot of money on it? It was really something that they invested in. Probably not. So I've done this activity with 7,500 people. It's never, ever a picture of an object of belonging. It's sometimes a picture of a pet, sometimes, but most often it's an animal or a loved one that brings them joy. And this is a great example about one of the most important happiness principles is social connection. The thing that makes us happy is our social connection, our family, our loved ones, the people that bring joy to our lives. It's not necessarily the stuff we buy or the things we aim for. And so that is a really great indicator of where I'm going with our presentation today. Okay, I do want you to keep your phones up for just 1 second. People at home, I'd love for you to participate as well. I want you to send a text to someone you haven't heard from lately or you haven't connected with lately. You can send an email or a text and just give a quick little hi and share something that that you're feeling that you want to share with them. For example, I might text my best friend Lisa, who we never talk anymore because we're both busy moms, and say that I'm doing a presentation and I'm really excited to share some information, something that's positive, but someone else. Welcome, thank you for being here. But yeah, no, okay, good. Okay, awesome. So I did text my best friend Lisa and I said, I just wanted to tell you that I love you so much and there's no one else I could see you as my best friend forever. You make me smile, XO. So something just very easy, just shot it off. Didn't even have any context, just I love you to pieces. Okay, there you go. And you can put your phones away. Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. We're gonna come back to the function of that and just at the end of the presentation. All right, so positive psychology has been focusing on happiness. Instead of focusing on pathology, abnormal psych, clinical conditions as traditional psychology has, the shift to positive psychology has been in the last maybe 2 decades. And it is just a very positive place to be in literature. It really focuses on what we can do to have positive change in our lives, what we have control over, what is good in our world to help us improve our mental health. The 3 concepts and the core beliefs in positive psychology that we're going to talk a little bit about today has to do with outliers. Sometimes in psychology, we're always studying how to be normal, and sometimes normal isn't all that great. So we're going to talk a little bit about what positive psychology tells us about outliers, people that might do things differently, and how that improves our mental health. The concept that our intention and our focus is where we can find the most happiness. So happiness is a choice. Yes, negative emotions have value, but if we can shift to more positive aspects, and a lot of research on this. And then lastly, how to create space in our very busy lives in order to focus on these things. I'm going to show you a video. This is the only video in my presentation, but it's such a winner. Sean Acor is the author of this book. You can see it's well loved. It's been to the beach. It's been on vacation with me. It's called The Happiness Advantage. And I heard that the Family Resource Center might be choosing this as the book club book for the summer. So it's a very good book. And I'm going to show you a TED Talk, which is I think like the most popular TED Talk of all time. And it is a little long. It's the only video. It's 12 minutes. But it gives a nice overview of this book, and it really is a nice introduction.
That's why
After this sponsored commercial. Okay, perfect. I'm gonna sit down.
sister was just 5 years old. We were playing on top of a bunk bed. I was 2 years older than my sister at the time. I mean, I'm 2 years older than her now, but at the time that meant she had to do everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to play war. So we were up on top of our bunk beds, and on one side of the bunk bed, I put out all my GI Joe soldiers and weaponry, and on the other side were all my sister's Milos and ponies and ready for a cavalry charge. There are differing accounts of what actually happened that afternoon, but since my sister is not here with us today, let me tell you the true story. Which is my sister is a little bit on the clumsy side, and somehow, without any help or push from her older brother at all, suddenly Amy disappeared off the top of the bunk bed and landed with us crash on the floor. And I nervously peered over the side of the bed to see what had befallen my fallen sister, and saw that she had landed painfully on her hands and knees on all fours on the ground. I was nervous because my parents had charged me with making sure that my sister and I played as safely and as quietly as possible. And seeing as how I had accidentally broken Amy's arm just 1 week before, heroically pushing her out of the way of an oncoming imaginary sniper bullet, for which I had yet to be thanked. I was trying as hard as I could She didn't even see it coming. I was trying as hard as I could to be on my best behavior, and I saw my sister's face this wail of pain and suffering and surprise, threatening to erupt from her mouth and threatening to wake my parents from the long winter's nap for which they had settled. So I did the only thing my little frantic 7-year-old brain could think to do to avert this tragedy. And if you have children, you've seen this hundreds of times before. I said, Amy, wait, don't cry, don't cry. Did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Amy, I think this means you're a unicorn. Now that was cheating because there's nothing in the world my sister would want more than not to be Amy the her. Amy the special unicorn. Of course, this was an option that was open to her brain at no point past. And you could see on my poor, manipulated sister's face conflict. As her little brain attempted to devote resources to feeling the pain, the suffering, and surprise she just experienced, or contemplating her newfound identity as a unicorn. And the latter won out. Instead of crying, instead of ceasing our play, instead of waking my parents with all the negative consequences that would have ensued for me, instead of smiling spread across her face, and she scrambled right back up onto the bunk bed with all the grace of a baby unicorn. With one broken leg. What we stumbled across at this tender age of just 5 and 7, we had no idea at the time, was something that was going to be at the vanguard of a scientific revolution occurring 2 decades later in the way that we look at the human brain. What we had stumbled across is something called positive psychology, which is the reason that I'm here today and the reason that I wake up every morning. When I first started talking about this research outside of academia, out with companies and schools, the very first thing they said to never do is to start your talk with a graph. The very first thing I wanted to do is start my talk with a graph. This graph looks boring, but this graph is the reason that I get excited and wake up every morning. And this graph doesn't mean anything, it's fake data. What we found is if I got this data back sitting you here in the room, I would be thrilled because there's very clearly a trend that's going on there, and that means that I can get published, which is all that really matters. The fact that there's one weird red dot that's up above the curve, there's one weird in the room, you know who you are, I saw you earlier. That's no problem. That's no problem, as most of you know, because I can just delete that dot. I can delete that dot because that's clearly a measurement error. And we know that's a measurement error because it's messing up my data. So one of the very first things we teach people in economics and statistics and business and psychology courses is how, in a statistically valid way, do we eliminate the weirdos? How do we eliminate the outliers? So that we can find the line of best fit, which is fantastic if I'm trying to find out how many Advil the average person should be taking, 2. But if I'm interested in potential, if I'm interested in your potential or for happiness or productivity or energy or creativity, what we're doing is we're creating the close to the average of science. If I ask a question like how fast can a child learn how to read in a classroom, scientists change the answer to how fast does the average child learn how to read in that classroom, and then we tailor the class right towards the average. Now, if you fall below the average on this curve, then psychologists get thrilled. Because that means you're either depressed, or you have disorder, or hopefully both. We're hoping for both because our business model is if you come into a therapy session with one problem, we want to make sure you leave knowing you have 10. So you'll keep coming back over and over again. You go back into your childhood necessary, but eventually what we want to do is make you normal again. But normal is merely average. So what I posit, and what positive psychology posits, is that if you study what is merely average, we will remain merely average. That instead of deleting those positive outliers, what I intentionally do is come into a population like this one and says, why? Why is it that some of you are so high above the curve in terms of your intellectual ability, athletic ability, musical ability, creativity, energy levels, and resiliency in the face of challenge, your sense of humor? Whatever it is, instead of deleting you, what I want to do is study you. Because maybe we can glean information, not just how to move people up to the average, but how we can move the entire average up in our companies and schools worldwide. The reason this graph is important to me is when I turn on the news, it seems like the majority of the information is not positive. In fact, it's negative. Most of it's about murder, corruption, diseases, natural disasters, and very quickly, my brain starts to think that's the accurate ratio of negative to positive in the world. What that's doing is creating something called the medical school syndrome, which if you know people who have been in medical school during the first year of medical training, as you read through a list of all the symptoms and diseases that could happen, suddenly you realize you have all of them. I have a brother-in-law named Bobo, which is a whole other story. Bobo married Amy the unicorn. Bobo called me on the phone from Yale Medical School. From Yale Medical School, and Bobo said, Sean, I have leprosy. Which even at Yale is extraordinarily rare. But I had no idea how to console poor Bobo because he had just gotten over an entire week of menopause.
Oh, darn it. What in the world?
Check out the Venmo teen account.
Oh, great. There it is.
See, what we're finding is not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world shapes your reality. If we can change the lens, not only can you change your happiness, we can change every single educational business outcome at the same time. When I applied to Harvard, I applied under there. I didn't expect to get in, and my family had no money for college. When I got a military scholarship 2 weeks later, they allowed me to go. Suddenly something wasn't even a possibility became reality. When I went there, I assumed everyone else would see it as a privilege as well, because they'd be excited to be there. Even if you're in a classroom full of people smarter than you, you'd be happy just to be in that classroom, which is what I felt. But what I found there is while some people experienced that, when I graduated after my 4 years and then spent the next 8 years living in the dorms with the students, Harvard asked me to, wasn't that guy. But what happened, I was an officer at Harvard to counsel students through the difficult 4 years, and what I found in my research and my teaching is that these students, no matter how happy they were with their original success of getting into the school, 2 weeks later, their brains were focused not on the privilege of being there, nor on the philosophy or their physics. Their brain was focused on the competition, the workload, the hassles, the stresses, the complaints. When I first went in there, I walked into the freshman dining hall, which is where my friends from Waco, Texas, which is where I grew up. I know some of you have heard of it. When they come to visit me, they look around, they say, this freshman dining hall looks like something out of Hogwarts in the movie Harry Potter, which it does. This is Hogwarts in the movie Harry Potter, and that's Harvard. When they see this, they say, Sean, why do you waste your time studying happiness at Harvard? Seriously, what does a Harvard student possibly have to be unhappy about? Embedded within that question is the key to understanding the science of happiness. Because what that question assumes is that our external world is predictive of our happiness levels, when in reality, if I know everything about your external world, I can only predict 10% of your long-term happiness. 90% of your long-term happiness is predicted not by the external world, but by the way your brain processes the world. And if we change it, if we change our formula for happiness and success, what we can do is affect reality. What we found is that only 75% of job successes, only 25% of job successes are predicted by IQ. 75% of job successes are predicted by your optimism levels, your social support, and your ability to see stress as a challenge instead of as a threat. I talked to a boarding school up in New England, probably the most prestigious boarding school, and they said, we already know that. So every year, instead of just teaching our students, we also have a wellness week, and we're so excited. Monday night, we have the world's leading expert coming in to speak about adolescent depression. Tuesday night is school violence and bullying. Wednesday night's eating disorders, Thursday night's illicit drug use, and Friday night we're trying to decide between risky sex or happiness. I said that's most people's Friday nights. Which I'm glad you liked, but they did not like that at all. Silence on the phone. And into the silence, I said, I'd be happy to speak to your school, but just so you know, that's not a wellness week, that's a sickness week. What you've done is you've outlined all the negative things that can happen, but not talked about the positive. The absence of disease is not health. Here's how we get to health. We need to reverse the formula for happiness and success. In the past 3 years, I've traveled to 45 different countries, working with schools and companies in the midst of an economic downturn. And what I found is that most companies and schools follow the formula for success, which is this: if I work harder, I'll be more successful. And if I'm more successful, then I'll be happier. That undergirds most of our parenting styles, our managing styles, the way that we motivate our behavior. And the problem is, it's scientifically broken and backwards for 2 reasons. First, every time your brain has a success, you just change the goalpost of what success looked like. You got good grades, now you have to get better grades. You got into good school, now you have to get better school. You got a good job, now you have to get a better job. Get your sales target, you could change your sales target. And if happiness is on the opposite side of success, your brain never gets there. What we've done is we've pushed happiness over the cognitive horizon as a society. And that's because we think we have to be successful, then we'll be happier. But the real problem is our brains work in the opposite order. If you can raise somebody's level of positivity in the present, then their brain experiences what we now call a happiness advantage, which is your brain at positive performs significantly better than it does negative neutral stress. Your intelligence rises, your creativity rises, your energy levels rise. In fact, what we found is that every single business outcome improves. Your brain at positive is 31% more productive than your brain at negative neutral or stress. You're 37% better at sales. Doctors are 19% faster, more accurate at coming up with the correct diagnosis when positive instead of negative neutral or stress, which means we can reverse the formula. If we can find a way of becoming positive in the present, then our brains work even more successfully as we're able to work harder, faster, and more intelligently. What we need to be able to do is reverse this formula so we can start to see what our brains are actually capable of. Because dopamine, which floods into your system when you're positive, has two functions. Not only does it make you happier, it turns on all the learning centers in your brain, allowing you to adapt to the world in a different way. We found that there are ways you can train your brain to be able to become more positive. In just a 2-minute span of time, done for 21 days in a row, we can actually rewire your brain, allowing your brain to actually work more optimistically and more successfully. We've done these things in research now in every single company that I've worked with, getting them to write down 3 new things that they're grateful for 21 days in a row, 3 new things each day. And at the end of it, their brain starts to retain a pattern of scanning the world not for the negative, but for the positive first. Journaling about one positive experience you've had in the past 24 hours allows your brain to relive it. Exercise teaches your brain your behavior matters. We found that meditation allows your brain to get over the cultural ADHD that we've been creating by trying to do multiple tasks at once, and allows our brains to focus on the task at hand. And finally, random acts of kindness or conscious acts of kindness, we get people when they open up their inbox to write one positive email, praising or thanking somebody in their social support network. And by doing these activities, and by training your brain, just like we train our bodies, what we found is we can reverse the formula for happiness and success, and in doing so, not only create ripples of positivity, but create a real revolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, he's hilarious. I really love him. He's fast talking, so my apologies if that was hard to follow. But what I want to do is I want to go a little bit deeper into a few of the ripples that he was talking about to make positive impacts. Because I think we all agree that with the research is showing us that positivity, it has tremendously positive outcomes to that'll improve our family. All right, so let's talk a little bit about happiness outliers. So the concept of the outlier was made really popular by Maxwell. What was his last name? Maxwell. Oh, I'm totally blanking on it. The dude who wrote the book. Outliers. Gladwell, thank you. I was like, what is his name? Maxwell Gladwell. Okay, so Malcolm Gladwell, thank you. So he really focused his book on achievement. So studying the outliers for achievement, but positive psychology has taken that over and is now studying the outliers for happiness. And it's kind of interesting because what they found is that being well-rounded does not equate to happiness. So we tend to raise our kids wanting them to be very well-rounded, having a lot of different experiences, trying everything out, which is not a bad thing. But what the research has shown is that if we can focus our intentions and our activities on our strengths, the things that we are good at, things our brain naturally is wired to enjoy and do, then we actually have better life outcomes for satisfaction and happiness. So one of the cool things that we do in our district, in 8th grade, we give all of our students the Clifton Strength Finder assessment so that they can recognize these 34 strength-based constructs, which are their like top 5. And then they help our teachers help our students identify where those strengths could be linked to activities on their campus, elective choices, career paths, and also the teachers are using their strengths when they create small groups to do activities, making sure that if this activity, let's have all of our empaths do it here, or mixing up the grouping so that there's different variety of strengths in those activities. So we're already really working well on that. In high school, we use something called the Holland Codes, which breaks down their strengths in one of 6 different areas. They call it the RIASEC test. And so we're already doing this. If we can possibly do this in our families too, is where we can really activate the happiness, knowing where your child's strengths are and not necessarily focusing on other areas to improve their areas of non-strength, but really like getting them activated into interest activities that work with their strength. It goes a little bit against maybe more traditional parenting where you think, oh, we really need to work on your social skills. So I'm going to put you in all these social-based sports when they have like a specific interest in building or in their Lego creation. So we want to focus on where our kids' strengths are. You definitely need to be self-aware. This is something that kind of bums me out, talking about happiness, is that when researchers identify happiness over a lifespan, it is not that your happiness improves over time. It's actually the opposite. So what this helps us understand is if you truly want to be happy, you need to be pretty self-aware. You need to reflect on where you are with your life, where what you're managing and how you're behaving and thinking. currently, because it's not going to get better later on. So Sean mentioned it, and he was like, once I get through finals, then I'll be happy. Once I get through this project at work, once my kids are potty trained, whatever it is, if we think in that manner, then we don't actually activate our happiness. And research shows that that happiness needs to happen today. My husband's favorite quote is, "We live in an eternity. The time to be happy is now." It was part of our wedding vows. It's like, he's been shoving it down my throat for years, but he was actually right. So, yeah, you. And the last area about outliers, when we study those outliers, we found, I say we, like I did anything, but the researchers found that the people who are the most happy are the people who are living with a legacy in mind. What do I want to leave behind? And what the researchers found is that those that are working in their local areas to leave a legacy behind. So think about your family, how your family's values, how you use activities like volunteerism or religious participation, or how we help out our community. That's you leaving a legacy behind. And those who focus their legacy on what they want to do to improve the world locally, not necessarily like, I'm going to, pray for those overseas who are hurting, like that's also very positive. But the key to happiness was that there was an impact in your own community, in your own culture, your own family, your own religious groups. So I thought that was interesting to bring up, because as a parent, I'm always trying to find ways to improve our mental health in our family. And I do that with intention because I'm a school psychologist, right? But we're not always happy, not at all. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm always happy. I'm actually quite grumpy sometimes. But the idea of focusing our free time that we do have, which is not much. I mean, I think we're all very, very busy, on leaving behind living with intention to support others in our community, that brings happiness right up the way. One thing I brought today is I brought some journals for everyone, and we don't have too many people in house, so I'm gonna ask you to select a journal, anyone you want. And I'm gonna give you a pen, so we're gonna do a journaling activity. Sean mentioned journaling as a key practice in positive psychology. Don't mind passing those on. Thank you so much. There you go. And those at home, I'm sorry I can't gift you a very cute journal, but there you go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'd love for you on your way out to take a few of these journals for the people in your home, so that you can possibly pass on a practice that's in research shown to be very effective. Talked a little bit about the concept of journaling and focusing on the good in your day. So what I'd like you to do is, I want you to answer this question. I know I am happy when, and just identify for you, what is an indicator of happiness? Take a minute or two just to write that down. And those who are participating in our chat, if you would like to throw it in the chat, I know I'm happy when, and if you're comfortable sharing, feel free to do that. Thank you for doing that. Do we have anybody on the chat?
And this is when I have my extended family together.
Absolutely. I did this a few days ago just to prepare like some activities, and mine was when my family's together and we're laughing. Like that is just an easy happiness vibe for me, is when we're all together. Anyone want to share? That's all right. What it helps us reflect on, if we had more samples here to share, we would see a trend that it has a lot to do with feeling a connection and sharing joy with others. It's nice to be happy independently. Like for Mother's Day every year, I spend it by myself, which is a little counterintuitive, but I just really like to be by myself. So I go away by myself every Mother's Day, and then my husband has to take the kids to school the next day on Monday, and it's wonderful. And then I take some time for myself. But that is just a one day a year. If I was doing that routinely, I would not find happiness in that activity. So finding joy, connecting to others, and maybe even helping people is a theme that often comes out. I feel happy when I'm of service to others. That's a typical theme. So this is the second core belief that we're going to talk about today. Happiness is a choice. You heard Sean mention that only 10% of our happiness is related to our environment, the situations that we're in. That was pretty glaring to me when I first read this book. I thought it might be like 50-50. But the research shows that only 10% of happiness is predictive of your space and the situation that you're in. So there's a shift in positive psychology. The father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, wrote a lot of books. One was called Learn Optimism. And we're going to talk a little bit about optimism because that is so much about the activities we choose to do. And when we think about how we can improve optimism within our family, that's some really easy takeaways. There is a place for suffering. That is when I say that sometimes I'm very grumpy. Suffering happens to all of us, and without suffering, we would not feel happiness. So we do not need to fake through suffering. We do not need to pretend that we're not happy. There is a wonderful book, and I always pronounce this wrong, so I Googled the pronunciation of it right before I came. Thich Nhat Hanh. He is the father of mindfulness, and he is also a peace activist, an author, and he wrote this book, No Mud, No Lotus. And I read it this last year and I loved it so much because I've read so many positive psychology books that are like, here's how you get happy. This is how you get happy. This is how you, and it can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So this was really happy because it's the art of transforming your suffering. And I highly suggest you read it if you're interested in how we can overcome our suffering, how we can find beauty in our suffering. I wear this teardrop necklace on particularly hard days as a reminder that suffering has a place and we need to be okay. It's information. Pain is information. It helps us understand where our boundaries have been maybe taken advantage of, where our self-care needs to go, where support is needed in our family or in our community, in our world. So definitely, and in this book, I loved it. He writes, there's no light without darkness. So we cannot feel happiness without suffering. It's a beautiful book. Expectancy theory and placebo effect are both things that are discussed in Sean's book, The Happiness Advantage. I thought this was so fascinating. A Japanese study that looked at students. I don't think we get away with this in the US because what they did, they took 13 teenage kids and they had them give their arms over to this study and they rubbed their arm with a plant that they told them was poison ivy. This is poison ivy. We just are going to study how your skin reacts to it. Of those 13 teenagers, every single one of them had a very traditional reaction to poison ivy. Boils, itchiness, red, irritation. And the interesting part about this study is that it was a harmless shrub. It was not poison ivy at all. And then they rubbed another 13 individuals with poison ivy. And they told them, this is a harmless shrub. There will be no reaction. And obviously, if you rub 13 people with poison ivy, you're going to have reaction. Only 2 had a skin reaction. Isn't that ridiculous? I was blown away by this research that Sean shared in his book. And it brings to light this concept of expectancy theory. Your brain is programmed to see patterns in your world. So whatever it expects to see and experience, it becomes your reality. So and I thought this was the most dramatic example of all time to be able to like hammer this concept in, is that what we believe to be true, what we immerse ourselves in will become our reality and will become true. And it's where the placebo effect in medical research, and it talks about it in this book, 55 to 60% of people that are told that there is a medication that they're receiving and it is not the medication, it is a placebo, have a positive reaction similar to what they would receive through that medication, which is another mind-boggling concept and really talks about how much our perspective means. This sorry, this says 90% in your control. I wanted to go just a little bit deeper on some takeaways for your family regarding optimism, social support, and coping with stress. So when positive psychology looks at optimism, how can we improve optimism? It goes down into these three concepts. Optimism is talked about a lot in research. So I took out some of the best gems for you. The 3 keys is a concept from Martin Seligman's book, Learned Optimism. And the concept is, and I have handouts for those who want them, and I'll send them to our people on Zoom. It comes down to personalization, pervasiveness, and permanence. Okay, so I'm gonna break it down. Sorry, I might lose a few and I apologize. P, personalization. This has to do with your attributional style. Have you ever met that person that just doesn't seem to be impacted by setbacks? They might have a setback, even if you might go, that's totally their fault because they were not prepared for this. But in their attributional style, they identify that, oh, well, that was just because of something outside of my control. And it just rolls right off. That setback just bounces right off, and they don't absorb it all as like an impact to their psyche or their value. And then you see those people who are working so hard to present themselves in such a great way, and the tiniest little thing happens that's completely out of their control, and what do? They say, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry about that, I'm so sorry that we started late, I'm so sorry that happened. And that is called attributional style. So those that have optimism are those that can attribute setbacks to a learning experience. It's just life. Bad things happen. It's not necessarily a reflection of me, my core values, or what I care about, what I'm trying to achieve here. And this is something, and I'm going to share maybe a little bit of a bias of my personal biases, so please don't judge me too harshly. But I find that in my life, men tend to have an attributional style that's different than women, and that our young kids can sometimes internalize setbacks as something very personal to them. It's their fault. It's because they're not good enough, that something is a setback. And so I love Taylor Swift. There's a song, If I Were a Man. Have you ever heard it? Then I'd be the man. And sometimes I will sing that to myself when I have had a setback, not necessarily because I don't think men have poor attributional styles or that they have impacts like this, but sometimes I am too caring and too worried about how other people perceive me. And I'll just sing, if I was a man, then I'd be the man, and I'd be the man. And I just like let myself feel that positive strength and energy that people with an attributional style that I aim for might exude. So whatever you gotta do, you gotta come up with something that works for you to remember that this is not necessarily about me. I tried hard, I'm gonna move on. Mantras are a great way to do that. Pervasiveness, that's the second key. Optimists see positive events as pervasive. And pessimists see positive events as a one-off, right? So when we can see, like we wake up and we say, it's gonna be a great day. My mom always says that. What are you most looking forward to today? Every morning I talk with her, and God bless her, I love her to pieces because I'm not in that mindset. I'm in the mindset of I got this meeting, that meeting, that meeting, I gotta get this kid there, I gotta move here, I got a doctor's appointment, and I might not necessarily be as pervasive looking for the good. So this is something that I can be more intentional about, thinking today's gonna be a great day. This presentation is gonna go great. These families are gonna enjoy their evenings. So in regards to permanence, this concept is whether we view negative situations as fleeting or lasting. So it's always going to be hard. This is always going to be rough. My relationship with that person is always going to be difficult. So if we can identify that right now this is hard. Right now this is a tricky part of my life. We're in a phase, we're in a season, but it's going to improve. When we have that perspective, our optimism goes off the charts. Social support is massive. There is a huge correlation, 0.7, and in research, anything above 0.5 is really exciting. So 0.7 in regards to social support and performance. So if you feel like you've got a social support, never mind, daughter, you're fine, then you can feel more confident tackling any task. So that's what positive psychology shows. Even if you are an independent person who likes to work separate, knowing that you have other people who have gone through this before, other people that you could call or to let them know about your success, you're going to be more optimistic. Social support is one of the most impactful things we can do, because what happens when we're feeling stressed or feeling exhausted or sad? We tend to hunker down and retreat. And that's okay if you need to take a minute. But what happens is that decreases our optimism if we do it for too long. I work with some kids who have depression. It's hard for them to get to school. They would like to just stay home. They've dropped out of their sport. They're no longer finding interest in the things that brought them joy. This is something we target first, is we build in routine social interactions and supports that they are encouraged and supported to do. And we do low level, low risk ones first, and we build them up back into that social network because it's a huge correlate with optimism. Lastly, coping with stress. All of these strategies are going to help you cope with stress. So I'm not even going to spend time wasting on that. So what I want you to do is take out that journal again. And I want you to write 3 things that you can do to increase your social supports when you're not feeling it. So this might be when you need a break, and when you're tapped out, when you're stressed, when you want to give up. In the chat, feel free to do this independently, or you can throw it in the chat. What are some things you could do to make sure that you are valuing social supports and you're connecting with another person? Take a second and write that down. Thank you for playing along with me. Okay, one thing that I'll share is that I have downloaded this app called Marco Polo. Anyone Marco Polo? I do not get any kickbacks on this, but my family lives all over the place. And so we have a Marco Polo chat group. It's basically like a walkie-talkie with a video. So I can post a video, hey, we're going here, here's the kids, say hi to grandma. And like we post the little videos, and they're available in a series that whenever you open up the Marco Polo app, I get to hear about my sister's work thing, how the dog is doing. You get to have that social connection with very low amount of like intention, because it's hard for me to be available when someone else wants to talk. It's hard for me to connect with that person. So Marco Polo has been a great option for us. And sometimes they're very long and I don't really care about what you have to say. So I just sort of fast forward through that one. It's to the point where my sister knows I ignore her sometimes, and she'll put a code word, and she's like, code word is cauliflower. And then I'm like, cauliflower, I watched the whole video, I saw it. So, but it's a great way that is easier for me than like scheduling a lunch or something like that. Does anyone want to share one way that they would increase their social supports? Yvonne, you have one? I
Yes,
saw you writing.
for me, it's just, I like to Zoom or, even like FaceTime. That's a way that I increase my social supports when I'm not able to really connect. I just like text my friends and like, what time's available? Are you available right now? I do a lot of sporadic things because we have kids and it's hard to find time. So we're able to find just a minute amount of time to just say hi. I do that.
Yes, I love that.
That's really nice.
Anyone else want to share?
Got one in the chat.
Okay.
Says, thank you so much, very informative. I wish I had better internet access.
Me too.
It's very glitchy
Okay,
and the library Wi-Fi. So thanking you.
thank you. I know you're suffering, hang in there. You're doing great. And whoever you are, just email me and I'll talk with you about this over tea. Okay, perfect. So, when we think about coping with stress, I do want, there's an opportunity to talk about, when you just don't want to push through and be positive and happy. I've done a lot of work as a psychologist in reprogramming traumas. So, in your life and in our children's lives, if there is something that is a routine impact, a trauma that they've experienced, or a phobia or a fear, one of the ways that we can cope with that is to activate therapeutic supports. So if your children do need therapeutic supports, your school psychologists, school counselors, social workers, or student support specialists, as we call you, have lots of resources to be able to help support that. One of the best therapeutic approaches I feel in regards to helping with traumas is EMDR or family systems work. So we can help you find the right type of therapy for your family or yourself. Okay, the third concept, how are we doing? Oh, we're doing so good. Okay, the third concept is creating space. This is the trickiest part, right? Because we are so darn busy. But we know the benefits. Sean mentioned a few of them. I did want to speak to the science of gratitude from UC Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center. This was another part of research that blew me away with how interesting it was. So they one of the optimistic strategies would be to share gratitude. And gratitude journaling is the reason I brought these journals. It's what I do with my kids across the street a lot. And what UC Berkeley found is that if you have a gratitude practice, remember how Sean said just 21 days for 2 minutes a day, what he was referencing is the impact of gratitude journaling. And I'm going to share this research study to kind of explain what this is. So there's a study, this was done in 2015, 300 adults. They broke the group into therapy with expressive writing, and therapy with gratitude writing. What expressive writing was about journaling about your day, your best self, about your world. And then gratitude writing was simple tasks in which they were asked to write a letter or note of gratitude each day. Okay, so I've also brought notes of gratitude, take a whole handful. So what the research showed, oh darn, is there any way we can move that just a smidgy?
Yeah, it shows it on there.
Oh, it's good in there. Okay, perfect. I'm not gonna stress on it. Okay, so what they found, they did this for 12 weeks and they measured happiness and mental health factors. There was no difference between the therapy group, we call it group A and group B. No difference. There was some positive outcomes, but it was similar. What they found is this group C had significantly more positive outcomes in mental health. It was pretty significant. They found those positive impacts at week 4. So it takes time. That's where Sean mentioned 21 days. If you write a nice note to someone thanking them for something they did, that's so sweet. But it's not necessarily going to have the powerful punch for your happiness unless you do it routinely. It becomes part of your practice. So the cool part is that at 12 weeks, it was even more significant. Then these researchers, 3 months later, after the therapy had ceased, and maybe some of these practices remained, maybe the person was really jazzed on it and they kept it going, but they measured with functional MRIs 3 months later, and they saw continued improvement in mental health, happiness and satisfaction, but also activation in the frontal lobe with problem solving and critical thinking. How wild is that? Just for writing a thank you note.
Yeah.
So you don't have therapy. It was talk therapy, CBT, so cognitive behavioral and psychotherapy. But they kept the therapy the same for all groups. Isn't that so interesting?
Better than drugs.
Seriously. And also, the interesting part too was of this group who wrote their gratitude, you don't even need to send the thank you card. Only 23% of the people routinely mailed the card out or gave it to the person they were grateful for. It's just the act. Why is that? Expectancy theory. We are looking for the good, we celebrate the good, we're focused on the good, our brain thinks more good happen. So we're just with that simple task. So take some of those journals and take some of those thank you cards home for your family. One of the things that can be tricky is remembering to do this, right? Is getting into that practice. Creating space is one of the core values of positive psychology. So in this book, the happiness advantage, Sean talks about research in 3 concepts: Zorro circles, the 20-second activation rule, and the social investment. Like, how can we make this actually part of our lives so we and our families have this benefit? Zorro circle is the concept of, I guess in the movie Zorro, I think this is just an old concept, but like in order to become a great swordsman, they kept the training circle very small. He was not allowed to go whip it around. He had to learn within, and then his circle became bigger and bigger in the movie Zorro. I didn't even watch the movie Zorro, but that's why it's called Zorro. Okay, so the concept is that if we can do a small approximation towards our goal, and then it becomes reinforced, our brain and our habits continue, and then we can get even better at having some of these optimism practices. And I'll give some examples. 20-second activation, 20-second rule is an activation energy. If you do anything for 20 seconds, your body just keeps doing it, basically, and your mind is okay with that. So that's when, like, I'm stretching for 15 minutes before I hop on the treadmill. Just get my butt on the treadmill. Just get on the treadmill. After 20 seconds, okay, I'm on the treadmill and I'm actually doing it. So it's activation energy. There's some ideas on how we can improve activation energy. I'm going to share them in a second. And then having a social investment and accountability for any new practice greatly improves the likelihood that it will continue. Okay, so I'm going to take it back to an example. So let's say your family, you guys want to grab a bunch of these journals and you want everybody to start a new habit of writing 3 things they're thankful for each day. Louisa Mosa, the school psychologist over at El Moro, and I decided we were gonna do it. So after the winter break, we each got one of these journals and we decided we were gonna do 3 happy things, 3 things we're grateful for every morning before we start work. Okay, so we had a goal. It's very simple, right? We're not writing pages of gratitude. We're not sending notes to everyone we think is great. We're just doing 3 simple things. That's the Zorro circle. Then 20-second rule. So this is my activation tip. Whenever I sit down in my office, the first thing I do is I open my laptop. So I put it on my laptop so that I had to move this puppy off every day that I would open it. I recently moved it to my telephone. That doesn't work anymore. So I stopped doing it. So now I put it right back on my laptop. So creating something where it's in your way. For you at home, this might be that it's next to your phone charger. And right before you plug your phone in, before you go to bed, it forces you to activate. Whatever it could be for your family. If you've got a morning routine for your little one, put gratitude journal in the morning routine. If you have a nighttime routine, I did this with my son when he was younger, we say prayers, I give him a hug, we say goodbye. So I got him a gratitude journal and he did it every night before we went to bed as part of our nighttime routine. And then social investment, Louisa and I every Friday would text each other one thing from our journal that week. And I put it in my calendar so I wouldn't forget. So that's the social investment. We still do this to this day. So it's been 5 months and we're really, really good at it. In regards to things like exercise, let's say, how can we apply this to exercise? I used to work out a lot in the morning, I don't do it. But my Zorro circle is I worked out at home. I used to do Orange Theory, it was hard to get there at 5 o'clock in the morning, so I got Peloton into my garage. That's my Zorro circle, I made it easier for myself. Activation, I would go to sleep in my workout clothes. My sneakers, right, I didn't wear sneakers, I would go with my socks because I would just hop into my bike. So that's the activation energy, anything that can make it easier. And then social investment, I joined the groups with the people across the street at the high school and we Peloton together. So those are examples of how things are actually going to stick. There's other examples if you want, we can talk more about it, but when we think about creating space for these activities, it has to be intentional. The last concept that I want to bring on home with is the concept of the lost dog. Okay, in our world, we've seen this a few times, right? We see, oh my gosh, I lost my beautiful animal, my lost dog, help me, help me, help me, help me. Do you ever see the sign that says, guess what? Ruffles was found, everyone don't worry about it, it's okay, he's home safe and sound. You never see this, right? We only see the bad, just like the news example that Sean gave in his TED Talk. So what we get to do is we get to force ourselves to share good things with others. And when we share good things with others, we are making more of a social investment and connection. So don't be afraid to share the good. Some people might not because they don't want to like brag, or they might feel like they're having a hard time. I don't want to share the things that are good in my life. But it's actually the reverse. When we share more about our personal joys and happiness, we actually improve our social connections. They feel more comfortable to share with you, and it increases your expectancy theory. So I would love to see, did anyone get a text back from their loved one that they texted at the beginning of our? She called me. Okay, I don't know how I feel it, but she wanted to call me back. Did anyone get a text back? When we have like 70 people in the room, we get a little bit more of a response back.
I gotta miss you.
Miss you.
So, yeah.
And it made that person happy knowing that you reached out. Anyone else?
I did too.
Do you mind sharing?
I heard through someone else that she started a new business, so I asked her about it. And I said, that's really cool, and she said, let's catch up and grab lunch.
Love that. So you helped with your own optimism because you shared something positive. I heard something great about you. Congratulations, that's awesome. I'm so proud of you. You encouraged her, and then she also thanked you for the joy that you brought in by that compliment or that connection, and you've made a social connection to the next. So that's improvement. Anything else that we saw?
Great photo. Us fun.
What? Who's is that a friend?
One of our best friends.
Oh,
Yeah. So I was like,
exciting.
you're crying.
Anything else? So what positive psychology wants us to do is to focus on what's going right. Okay, Give honor to the suffering. I always touch my necklace when I think about the hard stuff. Recognize it as, hello, suffering. I see you. You're here to help me make a different choice. You're here to help me think about my life and the choices I'm making, if there's a function for it. But refocus on the good. Give honor to that suffering, but don't stay there. Focus on what you can do each day, the gratitude journals, the notes of gratitude for others, the social connection, forcing yourself to put yourself out there socially. And most importantly, that optimism, thinking about your attributional style. What are you saying to yourself? What are you surrounding yourself with? And really just owning that. So I hope that you might walk away with one or two things to help your family and your own happiness, because when it does come down to it, this is another one of my biases. I know I have to take care of my mental health and my happiness because I set the tone for my family. What I bring out affects them too. And I hate that it's so much pressure on moms. That's not what I'm trying to imply at all. But if we can invest in our own happiness, it'll improve the happiness of our entire family. So thank you. Were there any questions in the chat? Any comments or concerns?
Thank you.
Oh, great. You're welcome. You're welcome. Okay.
And this is Grace Jones, I'm a school psychologist, so for those of you that may have joined a little later, you're amazing. Thank you for bringing and taking the time, because we really appreciate it. This is a recorded Zoom session, so we are looking forward to sharing it out to the wider community. We're working on a channel, so we are just really appreciate you. You're one of our kind of trailblazers in sharing your space and sharing that information, so I really appreciate that. And thank you for joining.
And if anyone has concerns or questions, wants to talk more about it, G Jones at LBUSD, because I'm happy to talk more about it with you individually about your specific family needs.
And I know that we tried to crunch it because we know Thursday's open house at 5, but I asked Grace last minute to kind of adjust the presentation to honor that. So again, we appreciate to those that are joining. I know there's a few that are up at Thursday watching it. So we really appreciate you taking the time to log in. And so thank you again, Grace, for being so flexible.
My pleasure.